Really delighted to be joined by the incredible Simone Zimmerman, who is the co-founder of If Not Now, which does incredible work bringing Jewish Americans together in the forefront for peace and justice, and also is the protagonist of Israelism, which is a fantastic film, which everybody should go and watch. I had the honour of sharing a panel with Simone when she was in London. Israelism was about the evolving relationship between many US Jews and the state of Israel, which we'll be talking about today as well. So that makes sense. Hey, Simone, how you doing?
I'm good. It's good to be here, Owen.
In these tranquil times, every day.
Yeah, super normal day.
Yeah,
Glad
it's
to
just
be here. Nothing else going on.
Yeah, it's every time the portal into hell is what new? What's the latest apocalyptic event? Always have to adopt the brace position. Let's just start. Actually, I want to talk to you to begin with what I think is a really, really fascinating poll, which has been conducted by the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. It's really interesting. It's about the attitudes of Jewish Americans. So, for example, it says, "What was your opinion regarding President Biden's decision to withhold arms shipments to Israel if Israel invades Rafah?" So this was a few weeks ago now. And strongly agree, 22.5%. Agree, 30%. So most agreed. Most Jewish Americans agreed with that, with disagreeing and strongly disagreeing only together about a fifth. So there's a quarter neither agreed nor disagreed. And also very interestingly, Israel has been accused of genocide by pro-Palestinian activists. Do you agree with that contention? Strongly agree, 12.5%. Agree, 17.42%. So that's approaching 30%. Amongst younger Jewish Americans, it was 39%. Nearly 4 in every 10 younger Jewish Americans think Israel is committing genocide. What's your take on those findings? Are you surprised, firstly? And what do you think it says about the way that Jewish American opinion is presented?
I'm not surprised, and I'm not surprised for a couple of reasons. The first is that actually polling has previously showed similar trends in the American Jewish community, despite the fact that still the loudest people in our community, the people with the most power, are from that more conservative swath of the Jewish community that conflate anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, whose primary political goal is shielding the Israeli government from accountability for war crimes. We've seen time and again that they actually don't represent, like the polling shows that they don't actually represent significant numbers of American Jews. And in 2021, there was a poll that came out that actually also said that 40% of young Jews believed Israel was an apartheid state, and 30% of maybe it was in the 20, it was around 20 to 30% of young Jews already thought that Israel was committing a genocide against Palestinians before, this is, years ago, before Israel was actually now agreed by many human rights organizations, by the International Court of Justice, as possibly committing a genocide in Gaza, right? So we've actually seen these numbers already moving for many years. We saw young people also say in that poll that they saw Israel's oppression of the Palestinian people through the lens that they understood racism in America. So what we're also talking about is a generation whose relationship with Israel is very much a part and parcel of their broader commitment to racial and economic justice. That's not the perspective that the American Jewish establishment takes. That's not the perspective of a group like AIPAC or the Anti-Defamation League. These groups that are given a lot of status as the kind of spokespeople of our community. But of course, it's not surprising to me, but it is incredibly encouraging and important to me that more people know these numbers, especially as President Biden and Democratic officials continue to cite American Jews and the notion of Jewish safety as the reason that they're supporting Israel's continued offensive in Gaza. And it's just clear that that's not what significant numbers of people in our community want. And it's so offensive. And I would even say that it endangers Jewish people that we are continuously used as the justification for American support of this war.
Because you mentioned Joe Biden then, he said no Jew in the world would be safe without Israel. So do you think, is this kind of example of non-Jewish, very pro-Israeli figures who will talk about Jewish opinion and what's best for the interests of Jewish people in a way that actually doesn't interact with the sorts of findings I've just read out there?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that is always important to say about this is like American Jews, like President Biden should be keeping Jews safe in America because he's the president of the, right? Because we are Americans. That's why we should be safe here. Not because we have a nation state overseas that is massacring another people in the name of our safety. And I think that President Biden's position is also just in line with an older generation of American Jews who, you know, saw Israel as as weak and vulnerable, who did not engage at all with the existence of Palestinians, with the Palestinian reality. And, you know, as Israel's occupation and apartheid has become harder to ignore and deny, those people are more in touch with where just the majority of our community are.
It's interesting. There's about 7.5 million Jewish Americans, quite almost the exact same size as the Jewish population of Israel.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think in terms of, because politically, instinctively, the Jewish community has always been relatively progressive, and certainly has rejected the Republican Party in repeated presidential elections and other national elections in the United States. But has a schism broken up, do you think? How much is a generational divide, as you say, between older Jewish Americans who tend to be Democrats, but who have a certain attachment to the state of Israel, and younger Jewish Americans who you're increasingly seeing, you're all the co-founder, if not now, after all, involved in these sorts of mobilizations against what Israel is doing, obviously, to Gaza?
Look, we've always had American Jews who have dissented against Israeli government policies. You know, there's this amazing new book called Our Palestine Question. It's actually like sitting here right behind me. But this academic who wrote about these very passionate debates that took place in the American Jewish community around the founding of the State of Israel, prominent rabbis and community members who were vehemently anti-Zionist, who, you know, saw the Palestinian refugee problem as something that they were committed to directly because of not just their Jewish values, but their own experiences, you know, being very close to the immigrant experience in America. And it's such a tragedy to me that over the last many decades, there has been this, you know, hegemony that is formed in the American Jewish community and in the American political establishment that has aimed really to like squelch out those traditions of dissent and debate, and to push anybody who challenges this very narrow right-wing, you know, conception of how America should relate to Israel out of the American Jewish consensus. And so, yeah, as you know, I'm part of a generation of young people who, as we've seen, you know, these repeated assaults on the Gaza Strip in the last decade, certainly right now is a watershed moment, just horrors beyond what even those of us, you know, who've been following this issues for years could have even imagined. It's such a breaking moment, and I think we're seeing just so many Jewish young people who are outraged that there are these institutions who speak on our behalf and are being used as cover for, you know, positions that we just find so egregiously offensive and sickening.
I mean, on that, I mean, do you see this partly as not? Well, I was going to say revival, but it's a tradition that's always existed. The left in its modern form wouldn't exist without the contribution of Jewish progressives throughout history. Movements for emancipation, liberation have always had large numbers of Jewish people involved throughout history, which is something anti-Semites have latched onto over and over and over again. How would you explain that tradition? Because that's clearly a tradition, I think, that a lot of younger Jewish Americans and younger Jewish Brits look to. I mean, it's a very specific tradition that strikes me. How would you describe that tradition? Where does it come from, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think in some ways there's like two different traditions that I would think about. Like one, which I just referenced, is just like, you know, Jews have been safe in America because of the broader civil rights and freedoms that all minority communities have in this country, right? Like, you know, there's obviously the kind of romantic, you know, narratives about Jews' involvement in the civil rights movement, but it is true that like our community is so like has been so well off in this country because of protections that are not just for Jews, that are for all communities because of American democracy, right? And so I think there's one camp of people who are just like, how who like see that it's just such a deep contradiction, right?
Mm.
That you have an American Jewish establishment, as Peter Beinart writes, really thoughtfully about, that supports civil rights and civil freedoms here at home and then denies those for Palestinians overseas, right? Works to reinforce American democracy and then supports Israeli apartheid. And it's such a contradiction. And obviously this is a moment in which those contradictions are being stretched to their most extreme. And then we also, I think, like, connected to that is also this tradition of Doikait, the Bund, which was like a much more, explicitly anti-Zionist organization, that very much is about, wherever we live is where we are safe. And so that's not just an American thing. That's, a much more kind of like radical socialist tradition.
This week we had a extremely, I suppose, divisive, I don't know what the right term is. It was a pretty gruesome, let's be honest, contest for, it was Jamal Bowman was the incumbent Democratic congressman. He's a black leftist, was a member of the Squad, which AOC and the likes, of course, pioneered in Congress. APAC, which is the main pro-Israel lobby group, threw huge amounts in, but the argument often was framed in terms of Jewish safety and the rhetoric of Jamal Bowman in that context. What's your general thoughts on that, and how would you explain, because APAC saw this, I think, as basically, we take this guy out and it will be a lesson to others. And there was, many would argue, an intentional conflation of critiquing the state of Israel and what it does, and the question of anti-Semitism and Jewish safety. So what's your general thoughts on the Jamal Bowman saga, I suppose?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we actually started this conversation with those polling numbers because, it's actually not just Jewish Americans who by and large support a ceasefire in Gaza, who support cutting military funding from the Israeli military, right? Majorities of Democratic voters, we're seeing this over and over again, are deeply opposed to the Biden administration's policies and how they're handling this war in Gaza. And, we are seeing growing numbers of Democratic electeds who are also supporting a ceasefire, and most of them are keeping their seats right now. So I think, there's this argument that I've found quite offensive, but it is interesting to break this down. There are certain APAC spokespeople who are trying to play down the influence of their funding and saying, sure, this was the most expensive primary race in history, but, Jamal Bowman was going to lose anyways. First of all, I don't think we should if you thought he was going to lose anyways, you didn't need to sink $20 million into this race, right? So it's so insulting to, Democratic voters and to the, masses of young people and just people in the district who had to vote, who had to try to out-organize this onslaught of funding from APAC. So I think the first thing I actually want to say is this is so deeply anti-democratic. It is such a threat to the integrity of our electoral system that we have special interest groups who can just pour millions of dollars. And it's important to say that, AIPAC's donors are by and large Republican, right? So it's the Democratic Party is also letting, people who have, sure, AIPAC is a special interest group that cares specifically about Israel, but also it's become a way that, fossil fuel billionaires or just Wall Street executives can also funnel money into a race like this. But just to go back for a second to this idea that he was going to lose anyways. So that also tells us something else, that they wanted to use this race to tell a specific story, right? They spent all this money on a race that actually arguably is about the fact that Jamal Bowman's district was redrawn 2 years ago. He has a lot more white voters in his district than he had when he won in 2020. And so I think you could also make the case that this is actually about a white suburban backlash to a black progressive as much as it's about, arguably more than it is about Israel.
I mean, do you think that, go on, sorry, I was going to say legacy.
No, go ahead.
The legacy of this, do you think the danger is because that narrative, you're right, has been spun. Do you think the legacy will be, as American public opinion has turned against what the state of Israel
Well, I
has
think that's
done.
what they want. That's what they want the story to be, right? They want the story to be, this is the APAC, this was like the APAC statement yesterday, that, pro-Israel is good policy and good politics. That's what they are spending all this money to do. They know that a majority of Americans and Democratic voters support a ceasefire. They know that they can't win the argument on its merits. So they sink all this money into misinformation. By the way, the ads that they ran in the district were not at all about Israel. So they were actually just trying to paint Bowman as a bad Democrat, a disloyal Democrat. And they can't fight the argument on its merits. They don't actually want to talk about the horrors that they are supporting and the reason that they're sinking all this money in. But it's important to speak out against this for a couple of reasons. It's, first of all, like, once again, the idea that any special interest group could sink this much money into a primary race. I think it's important to also say, for your audience, $20 million is, to my understanding, more than that has been spent on the entire UK election right now. Right. So, like, it's,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Something.
it's just such a
Wild. Wild.
I think Americans, like, it's almost like we are so used to money in politics that we just, like, don't take a minute to pause about how insane it is that, like, $20 million was spent in this race. Jamal Bowman's campaign, by the way, I believe only spent about $5 million, right? And that saps so much energy from a, a, a movement and a party that actually, like, needs that. We're
Mm,
having this
mm.
conversation the day after this, absolutely disastrous presidential debate. I just cannot believe that Democratic leaders think that that was a good use of energy and of resources within the Democratic Party.
The other thing I wanted to ask you is about, I mean, how, the nuances here in that anti-Semitism is not only real, it's undoubtedly on the rise, and people have to take it very seriously. You always have to be on guard about questions of anti-Semitism and the threat posed by anti-Semitism. And you also get those who weaponize the question of anti-Semitism, obviously, to silence those who stand against the crimes, for example, committed by Israel. And in that, the Anti-Defamation League in the United States, which will present itself as the kind of key organization fighting anti-Semitism. There's a big hoo-ha because it has been deemed by Wikipedia to be an unreliable source on, questions to do with Israel and Palestine. So that's one example. What's your general thoughts on that? About how do we, because there's a danger that some just, when they hear about anti-Semitism, they then switch off, and that's actually very dangerous. That's extreme, and it's irresponsible by those who talk about anti-Semitism. In those different contexts, it strikes me as the most irresponsible thing in the world, given the danger posed by anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, I think that it's actually kind of hopeful to me that, like, there's accountability for some of the misinformation that the ADL has been putting out there. We've been seeing reporting, both before October 7th, but certainly over the last many months, that have, exposed the level of dissent that exists within the ranks at the ADL, the fact that a lot of their researchers on white nationalism and anti-Semitism actually believe that the way the organization repeatedly conflates pro-Palestinian sentiment with anti-Semitism undermines the integrity of their data. That's what this whole Wikipedia thing is about. They put out statistics a couple months ago about anti-Semitic incidents in the US, and it turned out that, like, over a quarter of those incidents were Jewish-led marches for a ceasefire. I mean, it's actually so both insulting, first of all, that we have, like, a very powerful Jewish organization in America who is regularly calling Jews anti-Semitic. And more than that, it actually endangers us because it means that it's even harder to make people care about anti-Semitism and to believe that it's a thing when anti-Semitism is repeatedly used as the guise for quashing pro-Palestinian movements and activism. And that's also, like, I think, just to go back to APAC for a second, the idea that you have this powerful lobby that is trying to intimidate and silence opponents and spending millions of dollars, again, to protect the Israeli government from accountability for war crimes. We need more people speaking out against that and talking about how deeply that endangers Jews, not just because that group, is working with the MAGA movement, has, supported all these elected officials who voted to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Um, and and the fact that we actually can't talk about that, and like we've seen, just over the last couple of days, Democratic spokespeople going after, including young Jews who want to talk about how dangerous APAC is to our democracy, that actually undermines the fight against anti-Semitism, because we should be able to talk very clearly about how much, this is a special interest group, this is about money and politics. It's not about Jews. Anti-Semitism thrives in darkness, when there's room for conspiratorial thinking to come out. And one of the core ideas in anti-Semitic thought is about Jews as this like nefarious group trying to wield, power behind the scenes, and obviously involves a lot of tropes about money and outside influence. And so it's like, no, we need to talk about how our broken campaign finance system, how, Israel's relationship with the US is about US imperial interests, is about the interests of the
Right.
weapons manufacturers, is about Christian Zionists, is not just about keeping Jews safe. And when we can't talk about AIPAC, when we can't talk about the Israel lobby and the broader set of interests that are at play in US support for Israel, I think that actually endangers Jews and undermines the fight against anti-Semitism by keeping all of this kind of like in the dark as a taboo that we can't talk about.
I'm just finding in that context, I know this is something you care passionately about, is about, I suppose, building solidarity between all those who face
Yes.
hatred, racism. And we've seen something I know you've certainly on your mind and on the mind of other activists is, for example, anti-Palestinian racism and hate crimes within the United States, and how little that's been discussed, and how we build that solidarity in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, it's so first of all, I should just say that research has shown time and again that when tensions are heightened in the Middle East, that often results in a blowback against Jewish communities and Muslim and Arab communities, right? This is unfortunately also a broader American tradition. We've seen, Asian Americans get attacked in moments where there's like heightened anti-China sentiment in this country. American racism, not a great thing. And so it's important, once again, when we talk about like hate violence and bigotry, that we like look holistically at what's happening to all of the communities in America. And specifically when we talk about Palestinians in this moment, I mean, first of all, it's essential to say, like, it's actually Palestinian Americans who have experienced the most lethal and direct violent attacks since October 7th, right? We saw a 6-year-old Palestinian boy stabbed to death in Chicago. We saw 3 Palestinian college students shot in Vermont. Just this past week, a white woman in Texas tried to drown 2 Palestinian kids in a pool in Texas. I mean, this level. And then yesterday in Congress, we had 62 Democrats vote on a bill that would prohibit the State Department from citing the Gaza Health Ministry statistics. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib called that genocide denial, right? So like the level of anti-Palestinian racism, the idea that the US government can't even like cite the numbers of Palestinians that are being killed in Gaza. And we have so little coverage in our media about the very direct, very lethal violence that is targeting Palestinian communities across this country. I just find like so deeply upsetting and terrifying. And again, it's just when we talk about this as part of a broader conversation about anti-Semitism, like I don't want hate violence against any community in America, but I also very specifically need to say that like I do not want the fight against anti-Semitism to be used as a way to legitimize anti-Palestinian racism and violence. And I am certain that those who are presenting that false dichotomy are ultimately endangering Jews, because what they are basically saying is that you have to choose whose safety you care about. Do you care about Jews? Do you care about Palestinians? Right? And right now, in a moment in which the horrors coming out of Gaza are just so undeniable, and the violence is unrelenting. It seems like it's getting worse. Israel's impunity is just like so it's just so maddening and outrageous. Like the idea that all of this is being done for the name in the name of Jewish communities around the world, I'm just certain that that does endanger Jewish communities.
Simone, it's such an honor, obviously, to be able to chat to you about all this. Your humanity, your moral clarity shine through. You give me a lot of hope. I'm always looking for hope. I mean, look at the state of the world. So it's always incredibly inspiring to speak to people who give as much hope as you do. If not now, do incredible work. If you don't know about If Not Now's work, then please do look them up. Do look at Israelism. It's a brilliant, really brilliant documentary full of moral grace, humanity again. And I think amidst the horror, there are actually reasons to have optimism. There are people who are determined not to give up, to struggle, to fight against what often seem like insurmountable odds, as they always have throughout history, but those odds have been beaten before and they will be beaten again. So please do share this video, press like, subscribe, leave your comments. Love to hear your thoughts. But Simone, thank you so much for your work as always.
Thanks, Owen. It was good to be here with you.